Hello, everyone. I'm Joe Wellew. Thanks so much for tuning in to Expert Insights, where we talk with industry leaders across modern financial services to discuss leadership and innovation. Let's get started. Hey, everyone. Super excited for today's guest. After starting his business in possibly the worst year for financial markets since the Great Depression, 2008, those of you that remember, Shashank Shekhar has led his company to be one of the fastest growing mortgage companies in America by helping thousands of families secure better financing for their homes. Their growth has been built on the pillars of legendary customer service and an unrelenting focus on education. Shashank lives and breathes the mantra, "We are in the customer service and education business. We just happen to do mortgages." He is an Amazon #1 best-selling author. Shashank was also named 2022 Entrepreneur of the Year by Stevie Awards and is the host of the Shashank Redemption podcast. In September 2020, Shashank led his team to create Rachel, the first digital human in the mortgage industry. Super excited to have you with me here today, Shashank. Welcome. Good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you too, Joe. How are you doing?
Good, man. Good. It's 2023, hard to believe. And, we were catching up a little bit before we went on air and hoping for those rates to come down a little bit. But in spite of all that, some really good things happening in your organization. And I know as a technologist and as a leader, you're incredibly bullish on the opportunity that's out there right now. Maybe start out by giving us your take on the market as it is right now. From the lens of a practitioner, somebody that's running a company in this environment, and where you think we're headed this year?
Yeah, Joe, I bring a unique perspective because I run a company. I'm a technologist, as you mentioned, even though I did not really go to an engineering school to get my degree there. Also, I'm a loan officer. I'm one of the top loan officers in the country. So I do this thing every day, which a lot of loan officers are doing in the trenches. And that helps me bring perspective to my company, to the industry, which is unique, is because I could see it from different lenses. And where I really see is, there's a realist view to it and there's an optimist view to it. The realist view is that it's tough, and it is what it is. I'm not here to mince my words and give false hopes to anyone. It is very tough, both if you're running a company like me or you're just a loan officer and really doing your business. It's we saw for a hot second that the rates dropped under 6%. We were all hopeful that the trend will continue. Unfortunately, it didn't. The inflation just seems to be extremely sticky, even given everything that the Fed could possibly have done and more, actually. At some point in time, people were saying that Fed is actually doing way more than it should, and they should just let the economy be and the inflation will cool down. But on the latest report, we saw that month on month, it actually went up 0.4%. So it's not easy being Fed, for sure, because trying to balance the fact that you don't want the economy to head into deep recession, but at the same time, you don't want to be at a 7-8% inflation. That's driving mortgage rates, as probably all of us know. And the problem is that we don't see it softening. There might be volatile markets here and there, but not softening until later part of the year. We are hearing May, maybe June, and that's a long time for any mortgage company. We have been suffering for almost 12 months. Add that another 6 months to it, and that makes
a lot of pain.
Hard. Yeah. On the optimistic side of it is that if you have survived so far, hopefully you only have a few more months. And if you can continue grinding, which I guess the industry has been famous for. I got in the business in 2008. We got out of that. 2022 was probably slightly less worse than what 2008-9 was. So I'm still optimistic that people who stay in the business, people who do the basics that they are supposed to be doing, will come out ahead in the later part of this year and definitely next year.
If you think about the fact that, and I always kind of ground on home ownership in America is not going to go out of style, right? And we both agree on that, obviously. Give me your perspective as you see a lot of the consumer behavior out there. You see it from running your company and originating. How is the general consumer feeling about the housing market right now? And you guys are obviously in the Bay Area, and I know you do other markets as well. But love your thoughts on how the consumer's sort of attitude and mindset is right now. Different maybe from what we see in the media, but curious on your thoughts.
Yeah, on the ground, sentiments are very different than what you're hearing in the media. And the problem with media is that the numbers are compared sometimes year on year, sometimes month on month. You can be comparing, say, January 2021 to January 2022. We were at 3% rate, we are at 7% rate. So sometimes the comparisons, when you hear in the media saying the home sales fell, whatever, 10% or whatever, it's not apple to apple comparison. I was saying the same thing about the industry last year. We did just over $2 trillion last year. And if you look at the numbers in isolation, Joe, we did better than 2017, we did better than 2018, we did better than 2019, but we were comparing it against the 4.4 trillion that we just did the year before. So now you're at a 50% decline. And that's the problem with some of these statistics, is that we need to understand the comparison is against what. And that's why I'm bullish about inflation numbers going down, is because inflation numbers compared to last year's number will look so much better, is because the last year's numbers were so much higher. And it's not as if we will suddenly see a deep dive in the numbers, but because we'll be comparing it against last year, the numbers would look better. But talking about what I'm seeing on the ground, I mean, buyers are still very bullish about buying homes. In fact, they are thinking that this is a time where they might just be able to get some kind of bargain for the first time, maybe in a decade or something. I mean, we have rarely seen a market where you don't have to go over asking. You might potentially ask for some seller credit. And those are the forces which is still driving them to buy, fully knowing that when the rates go down, they can still refinance. It's not that you get one rate and you get stuck with that for the next 30 years.
You're seeing certain lenders really drill into educating the customer on, hey, you know what? This is your home. This is the most important thing in your life. In a lot of cases, having a place to live. And getting into a home now, yes, it's going to be maybe more expensive on a monthly basis, but the odds of rates being elevated for many, many years is, people are not they're not generally feeling like that's going to be the case. Are you guys doing anything specific when it comes to educating both your originators and the consumers on how to think about housing, how to think about the rate environment and refinancing going forward?
Yeah, I've been a huge fan of data-driven influence. So our industry has always had taken the bad rap, is because we tend to tell everyone that it's a great time to buy and it's a great time to sell in every single market. And that has given the reputation that, of course, we will say that is because we get to make commission out of this. And that's why when people say, oh, the realtor said that this is a great time to buy, they take it with a pinch of salt, is because, of course, the realtor will say it's a great time to buy. And that's why I've been driving, both in my team and within the industry, a lot of data which points to the fact that even if you think there will be a recession, I mean, recession after recession, the home prices have actually stayed the same or have gone up, traditionally speaking, other than the 2008, 2009. And I've looked at home prices going all the way back to 1972. So this is not a recent trend. This has been there for over 5 decades. But if you look at the mortgage rates, every time it goes up, it goes down. So we may not be able to predict whether it will go down in May or June or September or October, but we know that it will not stay at 6.5%. At some point of time, it will get under 6, maybe even get under 5% at some point in time. And the good thing about US mortgage markets is that refinancing is almost as easy, in fact, easier than purchase in most cases. And so it's not a question of, wow, I'll have to go through this entire process all over again, and who knows if I will be able to refinance or not. Because if you're qualifying for a purchase now, chances are you'll qualify for refinance again. So data-driven influence, especially with the kind of customers that we work with, younger audience, I think tends to work much better than only emotion-driven influence.
I think that's so exceptionally well said. And one of my favorite sayings is, the data doesn't lie, right? If you look at the data, you look at the analysis over the long run, it gives you context. It gives you a much better grounding of reality. And so as you're going through the sales and marketing process with prospects, leads, referral partners, because I think a part of what I've heard about you guys, like, you do a great job educating not just consumers, but also the real estate community as well. And, correct me if I'm wrong, but are you really intentional about adding that talk track into the sales process across the board?
Absolutely. And that's something that I've been driving on my company meetings to my loan officers. I've been educating other loan officers in the industry, really. I mean, I've done tons of webinars this entire year with MGIC, other platform, NMP, everyone, trying to teach them the same thing, is that, look, this is when the market gets tough. You can't just have unidimensional approach to selling. You need to have multidimensional approach to selling. And that multidimensional approach in this case is that you need to push the data-driven influence. You need to push product-driven influences, like what is a good product market fit in a market like this? Are you talking about seller buy-downs? Are you talking about temporary and permanent buy-downs? So there are several things that does play a role. And you're right, a lot of this education needs to go to the real estate agents, because within the industry, you might even hear from people like us, and maybe you're aware of this, but within the real estate side of it, very few people are talking to them. A lot of loan officers, you'll just assume that that's a conversation they're having. But this is a great opportunity for you to go and pick up some of those real estate agent partnership that you have been working on for a long time by bringing some of these ideas, saying, hey, why don't you take some of the data that I'm giving you to your consumers who are sitting on the fence and telling them why it's a great time to buy?
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the things that I've heard people talking about, and I believe this as well, and it sounds like you're an advocate, is, getting the loan officers and the sales people in our industry, advisors, whatever you want to call them, originators, people that help consumers purchase homes, right? People that help them with financing. If you index hard on education and advice, that's always your true north versus just trying to sell, right? So basically, stop selling and educate and then advise. And it sounds like that's really your part of your playbook through and through. And I would argue probably a part of your secret sauce to being successful over all these years has been, you've really stayed true to that, right?
It has been, Joe, and you hit the nail on the head there. That's exactly true. Is that when I got in the business in 2008, I was a year and a half in the country. I knew 3 people in the entire US back then. I had my closest relative was in Canada. I had no friends here.
This is all in 2008?
This is all in 2008.
And you knew only 3 people in the US?
Entire country. And those 3 people were my colleagues from a company that just got shut down. So they weren't buying in a hurry, for sure. And I had $1,900 in savings. I was like 18 months into the country, so I hadn't saved.
All right, we got to walk into this a little bit. I know this isn't on the script, but this is really incredible because you and I both get the chance to talk to a lot of people in the industry, and you hear so many people, their default is always to point to the obstacle, right? There's always an obstacle. And, coming to this country, knowing 3 people in the entire country, starting in the greatest financial crisis since the Great Depression, you said you had less than $2,000, like you could not see obstacles. You had to only see opportunity to be successful. Walk us through, man. Like, how did you? I know we don't have all the time in the world for the story, but I want to hear a little bit about how you were able to overcome that, because I think it's really incredible and it's relevant right now for what a lot of people are going through.
It is, yeah, and it hopefully gives some hope to people who are struggling, is because hopefully they can learn from some of my struggle. My main reason really for getting into the business were twofold. One was the fact that I always wanted to start my business, and for some reason I thought that, hey, this is I lost my job. This is something that I'm still low risk. My daughter was, I think, a year old then, and I was like, if I don't start my business now, 10 years later, there might be just way too many obligations, just way too many things for me to take the risk. So first, I think there's an element of risk taking. There's an element of entrepreneurship, something that I always wanted to pursue. 2, I saw what happened to people in 2008, like lack of education. How could it destroy not just the financial system, but technically the entire country, if not the entire world financial services system and everything else that got attached to it. So you could see that education could play a huge role in not just turning around, but keeping that kind of problems at bay down the road. So, and that's when, of course, I struggled in the first 12, 18 months because I didn't know anyone. When you get in the business, the first people you turn to are people you went to college or people you went to school with, or your neighbors or your family or somebody, because I didn't have that luxury. As they say, necessity is the mother of invention. So both because of my focus on education, and 2, because I had no other way of getting business, I got into blogging in 2009 when literally I probably remember 5 people who were blogging back then. This is what about
it was pretty sparse. I remember that time very well. It was
and that comes from also understanding your audience, because I was looking at working with younger audience, people who were first-time home buyers. And I could see that there was a shift in terms of the media consumption. They were moving away from print. They were moving away from TV. They were getting more information from online. So I knew that I had to be there. And that's one of the marketing 101. You need to be where your audience is. Because you could be a star on, I don't know, you could be on the cover of New York Times, but nobody reads New York Times. If that's your demographic, then it really doesn't matter. So being where your audience is very, very important.
Yeah, no, that's so. So when you got started, you literally just grassroots said, all right, I have to create my own ways of generating business. And so for you, that was starting to put out content, educating the market on buying a home, financing, probably all those topics. And that led to opportunities, right? So you just, sounds like very much just did the work and just leaned in and kept grinding, right?
Yeah, at one point in time, when I started blogging, I think it was April of 2009. And for 6 months, I wrote 2 blogs every week, and 6 straight months. And when I got my first call, I think was in October or November of that year, somebody said, hey, I just saw your blog or read your blog or something. And I almost fell off the chair. I'm like, oh, somebody's actually reading this thing that I've been writing for 6 months. And I've taught so many classes in blogging since to hundreds, if not probably thousands of people. And most of the time they come back after 2 months saying, this thing doesn't work. I've been writing it for 2 months, nothing happens, nobody reads it, I haven't gotten any lead. And that shows you is that it's a tough business for sure. I mean, I will never discount how tough this business is. But the fact that if you know that there is something which will work, and education is probably on top of that list. I can't think of anything which exceeds or which can rank higher than that list. And that takes time, building your audience, understanding your audience to follow you, and eventually then getting to leads and finally closings. It's a long cycle business. We're not selling credit cards. Yeah.
No, most people just quit, right?
Yeah,
most people don't want to put in the time. Yeah, no, so well said.
Yeah, but once you put in the time for something like this, that's what gives you the predictability and the sustainability and the consistency of the business, which very few ideas actually give you. That's why we see so much of roller coaster in the industry. Not everything is influenced by macroeconomic factors. Some of it is because we don't, both as a mortgage company and as loan officers, we just haven't figured out of building a sustainable business model.
So many people are still so transactional, right? And coming off of the exuberance that we saw, you've seen that shift to where people were forgetting that we're still in a relationship business, right? And to build those relationships digitally or face to face is a process, and it's you have to have a very thoughtful approach to doing it. And so I want to segue in. We started segueing into really what I would put under the bucket of marketing and customer engagement, marketing and just growing the business, and blogging was a component for you. But as you think about, as we sit here today, what are some of the immutable laws of marketing that you believe are still tried and true and super relevant for anybody that's trying to, say, grow the business in this environment?
Really, 2 things is what I focused on. One is the product market fit. I think we get it wrong a lot of time, which is we have a product that we feel very good about and not understand that the market may not be ready for it, or the other way around. I could be sitting in a market where there are lots of retirees. I could be sitting in a Florida market where a lot of retirees are moving, but then I'm not offering reverse mortgage as an option, for example. Or I could be sitting in a market where there are lots of immigrants who have probably very small down payment, but I'm not offering down payment assistance or low down payment programs to them. That's a product market misfit. And that's, for me, is very important when you try to start building your marketing strategy, that you first test your product market fit. Do you need to be in a different market because your product does not address it? Or do you need to change your product to fit the market? And the second one, which I said earlier, is that don't figure out the audience that you want to target and understand where that audience hangs out. If you are targeting a market which is, say, more Gen Z, more millennials, because that's of course the future of home buying is, but you are focused more on, say, TV, you're focused more on print, or you're saying I don't use social media, I don't care about social media. I mean, it becomes hard because you are at a place where your audience is not, or your future audience is not. So for me, those were the 2 things when I was looking at in 2009 to carve out my marketing strategy, and it has held up. It has withstood the test of time, and I could still use the same strategy over and over again.
It does really still work today if you think about it, because what you're describing, I talk about it slightly differently, but what you're talking about is really clarifying your audience and then segmenting your audience down to who's my ideal persona in terms of, let's say I'm going to go after reverse lending, right? And as an example, you're going to do segmentation of your audience to make sure you're pinpointing that group of people, and then your marketing, your approach, your campaign, your content is then very much designed to speak to that, not only where they hang out and where they consume content, but also what they care about, right? I mean, you go all the way through. Yeah. It's really well said, and it has held up so long. And a lot of people think that all the technology now, and certainly the channels of engagement and what you can do with data, has become more robust. But it really still is understanding your audience and then making sure the product set that you have can hit that bullseye. And I want to get in a little bit to the Gen Z segment, and you've always done really well as a thought leader in this space, and in terms of your vision for how this generation who represent a massive opportunity going forward. But where do most lenders get it wrong when connecting with Gen Z?
I don't think we understand Gen Z very well as an industry, and the reason for that is that it's a very aging industry as of now. The average loan officer is probably closing in on 50, maybe even higher than 50. The same is true for mortgage executives. They are probably even older because they probably were loan officer for a few years and then became executives. And then so I think we are really not on the ground with Gen Z. And we need to understand that they think and behave very, very differently than in some cases even millennials, because some people think, oh, we got millennials, we understand them, we understand Gen Z. Gen Z, not just their media consumption, which is very high on video platforms like YouTube and TikTok, followed closely by Instagram and maybe Facebook, and then everything else is much smaller in there. But also the fact that they actually take financial advice from YouTubers and TikTokers. And you would think sitting here, 50-year-old mortgage executives, you must be kidding me that they are taking more financial advice from people who are like YouTube influencers or something. But Forbes Advisor did a research. 76% of Gen Zers had taken a financial advice from someone on YouTube and TikTok and actually worked on that advice. It's not just they have taken an advice. And again, you would think, oh, maybe they're taking advice on small little thing, which stock to invest in. We all know the story of what happened on Reddit.
Yeah.
So maybe they're thinking, oh, maybe which stock to invest in. But almost 22% of home buying tips or home buying information was taken on YouTube and Reddit. And same with debt consolidation or credit repair, almost 35%. So what we are seeing is that they are not just present on that platform, because the first theory was that, yes, they are present on that platform, but they're not taking financial advice from people there, right? So first, that's untrue. Second, even if they're not taking on those platforms, 35% of them are doing online research, which means people like us who are blogging have a huge opportunity of getting found or creating videos on YouTube. So we need to get out of that mindset of the fact that, oh, we have done it this way and it has always worked. I'm not saying this is the only way to work, but as Gen Zers get into more mainstream, and they already are, it will become harder and harder to target them through traditional media and through traditional way of working. So if you don't switch that script now, if you don't start focusing on that now, 5 years later, you may be too archaic to be able to attract that segment.
So said differently, and I think you've really put an exclamation point on this. If you don't have a strategy around video as part of your marketing playbook, you better think about it, because you're going to be missing an entire segment, the way they consume content. You agree with that?
I do, but also, Joe, there's really, for me, the way I look at a customer journey is that whether it's your Gen Z or millennial or retirees or whatever, is that there's 3 stages to experience. There's a pre-stage, there's during stage, and there's after stage. The pre-stage is they have not interacted with your product and service. So they have found you on the web, they've read your reviews, somebody told you about them. That's a pre-stage. During stage is when they actually engage with your product. That's when you're giving them the mortgage. They're going through that process. And after is what happens after the closing. And I think even if you get one part of it right, meaning say you're a really good marketer, you understand Gen Z, or maybe you're slightly younger.
Top of the funnel, you're good at that.
You're really
right?
good at top of the funnel. Now they come in, and now you don't have the digital experience that they're looking for. I started taking online application in 2008 when nobody even knew there is something called an online mortgage application. And that's why it's really important to understand that just getting them in the door is just one part of the experience. You're still missing the other two. And that's
Man,
where,
that's so true.
yeah, that's where when a robust CRM comes into place, is both during the journey and after the journey, is because that's where you're able to stay in touch with them, both during and after. And that's why we have, say, 8% to 15%, depending on who you're hearing, retention rate, is because the industry just does not have that kind of focus on the fact that, hey, once this closes, what happens next? And so platforms like Total Expert, I mean, you could potentially, I mean, increase your business 10, 15, 20% practically by doing nothing, or putting some of these post journeys on autopilot.
What we always look at, and what's still shocking, is how awful the industry is at transitioning from the transaction to a longer term relationship with that customer, right? But equally as shocking, and you're pointing it out, is if you look at the customer journey, there's holes all over the place in where opportunity is lost. And in this environment, I think we spend a lot of time there's not business falling from the sky. So people are tending to spend time looking at it. But it's interesting because if you look at the pull-through rates and you look at, call it lead or application to close, and the numbers are all over the board, but they're not great. A lot of organizations have maybe 50%, some 60% pull-through. So 40 to 50% of the people that apply are not actually funding. And a lot of the time is the process maybe is taking more time. They're out shopping, and the lenders, and tell me if you agree or give me your color on this, the lender is then not adding any additional value, any additional education, any additional content, any additional communication to help bring them through that customer journey. Is that how you see it, or give me your context around that?
Yeah, I see it that way, and understand it this way as well, is that even if that person came into the pipeline and now has no option to go out because they have 30 days to close and you're on day 7, they don't really like your process, but they have to still go through it. They're not referring you future clients. They are not coming back themselves. And you're losing I did 7 loans in my first 12 months, Joe, because of course I didn't know anyone, I had no money to invest, whatever. All of those 7 clients, each one of them, are probably valued over $250,000 for me as of now, maybe even $500,000, is because it's not the size of the database. It's like every single person could potentially be a 7-figure customer for you, because over a decade or so, they will come back, they will buy investment homes, move up homes, they will refer a friend who will refer a friend. And that's part of the transaction that we don't understand, is that even if you made the client go through that transaction because he or she had no option, they're not coming back to you. They are going back to somebody else who promises a much more streamlined, much more digital, much more faster experience next time.
So early on in your career, this is really cool that you're pointing this out, and it's obvious why you've been successful. You understood the customer lifetime value from day one. It sounds like that was part of your strategy. For every customer you looked at bringing in, it was not, hey, I'm gonna make $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever it is on this loan, and I'm gonna help them buy their first home. It's what's the lifetime value potential of this individual customer, and how can I make sure that I capture all of that over the next 20, 30 years, right?
Yeah, in marketing, it's called LTV, which is very different than the mortgage LTV, which is lifetime value of the client.
Totally. I was just talking to Dan Cantanella the other day on this, and saying, in software, we talk about customer lifetime value all the time.
Yeah, SaaS products talk about that all the time.
But in lending, it's like this new concept all of a sudden, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the first things that I teach any new loan officer, is that don't worry about how much you make per transaction first year or two. I mean, make enough so that you have bills to pay, but understand that you need to be working on building your database, not so much about how much you're making on each and every client. Because if you can get 20, 30, 40 people in the database, then those 20, 30, 40 people could be worth so much more. You have to play a long-term game with something like this. So the LTV from a marketing or a SaaS perspective, it's something that the mortgage industry really needs to understand, because that's how those industries work. And for us, LTV of course means something else, but I hope that we could bring in this new acronym for the industry into much
instead of loan to value, customer lifetime value.
Yes, call it CLTV or LTV, whatever, but that's lifetime value of the client.
Yeah. So when you think about some of your foundational principles around marketing and growing the business. Working the database and being really intentional about that is a core part of that. Anything you're willing to share on some of your best practices on maintaining, nurturing, and getting the most value out of a database? Because I think a lot of people are trying to figure that out right now.
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, we need to simplify the business to the sense that 80% of our job should be about fixing three problems. And I've said this, that I was really struggling in the first year. And I thought everybody that I would talk to, they would say, oh, you need to learn this and you need to learn that and you need to network. And so I was like, whoa, as a successful loan officer, I need to be good at these hundreds of things. And I would never be able to get to it. And then I kind of broken it down into something very simple. And I'm like, really, at the core of it, you really need to solve three problems, which is how do you get more leads? How do you convert those leads? And how do you get the converted leads to refer you more leads? And that's the essence of the business. And that's all there is. Of course, there is support, everything that happens behind the door to support these activities. And I'm not discounting operations or everything else is critical to this job. But really, that's what our focus should be. And
everything should roll up to those things.
Everything should roll up to those three problems. If you can solve those three problems, I mean, everything else is really secondary. And the problem is that we lose our focus on that. And so everything, whether you're doing operational efficiency, you're implementing new technology, nothing should be for the sake of this technology is for technology's sake. I mean, I sit in Silicon Valley and you'll be surprised how many times I hear a product idea, even funded $20-30 million by VCs. I'm like, what problem does it really solve? And how did they get that kind of funding? Of course, they went to Stanford or something and they had pedigree and all of that stuff. But we know that this is not a product that's going to last. And lo and behold, 2 or 3 years later, the company closes down because they're not really solving any problems.
But we've seen that story so many times.
Yeah, and that's the important part, is that you take those three problems and then you make your own solutions. I can, like for us, you because I asked us to give us some tips on all the three parts of it, and I'll wrap it because I know we are going ASM. But for the first part, which is how do you get more leads, for us, it was always about education. And not just education directly to the client through content creation, but doing a ton of events for real estate agents, a ton. Whether I had 5 people in the room or I had 125 people in the room or I was doing a national webinar, it really doesn't matter. A ton of events for our real estate agents, ton of education to our financial planners, to our CPO, every referral partner, because they are in direct contact with the clients and they need to be educated on what's there. For the second part, operational efficiency and digitization of the entire process. So whatever technology that you need to digitize the process, and always question operational efficiency. We have an operational call every week to figure out, can we save 2 minutes from here? It's nothing radical. We are not changing the mortgage process dramatically, but sometimes why are we ordering flood cert and then going back and doing this? Why can't we do both of this at the same time? Sometimes it's really minor things. It's a Kaizen, a philosophy that Japanese car makers did, and that's why they kind of outsmarted the American car makers at that time. And then finally, what happens after closing is how do you get your closed clients to refer you more clients? That's where an effective CRM comes into place. If you do not have that, then you're losing. I mean, half of my clients come from that after process. So imagine I would be doing 50% less business. Of course, some years it's higher, some years it's lower, but I would be doing half the business that I'm doing now if I was just focused on the first step and the second step and I was not solving problem number 3.
That's unbelievable. And it just really puts an exclamation point on how important that process is. And particularly like 50% of your business coming from the database, which is huge. And I think that if you look at elite producers and elite organizations, using data to drive deals and drive opportunity is core to that strategy. So Shashank, thank you so much, buddy. Last question, and I'm going to let you go. What advice do you have for lenders this year to be successful? It's a tough question.
Sit down and focus on solving those 3 problems and give yourself some time. I know it's really, really hard to give. Sometimes it feels even 1 extra week of less production is a lot. And I know that I run a very small company with very tight budgets and not the deep pockets that some of the bigger companies have. But that's the thing about this industry, is that you need to have a 3-month plan and a 3-year plan at all points in time. You should be working at both simultaneously. If you're only working in the short-term plan, then you get in a year like 2022 and 2023 and you're crushed. And if you're only working on the long-term plan, then you have to have very, very deep pockets, which of course we don't do. So that will be my advice, is that work on a 3-month plan and a 3-year plan, and work on it simultaneously. And more importantly, actually work it. When I say work on it, that's actually working it, not just writing it on a piece of paper.
Do the work. Well said, buddy. Thank you so much, Shashank. And congrats on all the success you've had the last few years, and look forward to catching up soon, buddy.
Yes, I look forward to it as well. And thank you for having me, Joe. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.